What's good, YouTube? Steph here, and welcome to Theta Space. Today I'm jumping on this latest thing among the music YouTubers. I'm going to be listing my favorite comfort albums. So my first question when I heard about this topic is, what's a comfort album? I watched Scott Lade's video, The Prog Corner, and Pete Pardo's Sea of Tranquility. Pete redefined them as feel-good albums, records he plays when he wants to be put in a good mood or just be uplifted. Scott still called them comfort albums, but I think his definition was still pretty close to Pete's. So considering that your definition of comfort album is not her definition of comfort album, is not their definition of comfort album, and also it may be broken and you're paying for it, I choose to call a comfort album something that I can relax to, something that won't demand much from me as a listener. Like, for example, I said some weeks ago in an earlier video, I love smooth jazz. Watercolors is my go-to Sirius XM station. I went to see Brian Culbertson here in Salem back in March, and that's the sort of thing I consider comfort music. It's pleasant to listen to. A lot of it's got a funky groove to jam to, but as its detractors like to point out, it tends to be light on musical substance. So this rules out a lot of my favorite records, prog or fusion with complex, challenging composition and arranging. There's no Yes, no Return to Forever, no Dream Theater or Symphony X, certainly no Henry Cow or Motor Totemist Guild. I think you get the idea. I don't play U-Totem for a comfort listen. A comfort album is something I can put on and, not shut off my brain as such. That's not what I'm trying to say. Not that it's simplistic or basic, certainly not less than, but something I can just enjoy for what it is, not having to engage with it on a more cerebral level. I'm not dragging any of these records I'm about to list. If I name it, it means I like it. So the first record I thought of when I settled on what comfort album means to me is The Alien Jams by Aja and Cosmosis. Aja. I've never heard the guy's name pronounced, so I don't know how you're supposed to say it. Aja and Cosmosis. These guys are two psytrance producers, but together they made this instrumental record of slow trance beats that they play guitar solos over. It's a great album to just groove and chill to. In a similar vein, I gotta have Spangle on this list. Almost any Spangle album will work, but I picked the debut Are You Spangled? Because most of the arrangements on it are so minimal, they're not as heavily layered as tracks on later albums. They're mostly just beats or grooves with occasional melodic parts. David Gilmour's first solo album, released in 1978, is another good comfort album for me. Mostly laid back with a couple more rocking tracks. Understated but competent songwriting and playing, and Gilmour's great guitar playing. Gilmour is my top favorite guitarist of all time. When he plays a solo, he says more with a dozen notes than Van Halen or Malmsteen could say with 100. And speaking of Gilmour, Pink Floyd's Obscured by Clouds makes my list as well. There's a lot in common here with the album I just mentioned, except this is with the Floyd. Actually, the last Floyd album before Roger Waters took over the creative control and dominated the songwriting. Most of the songs are sung by Gilmour or Rick Wright. Waters only sings on Free 4, and as with Gilmour's first album, most of these songs are in a pretty mellow vibe. I'll keep the rock guitar theme going here with Flying in a Blue Dream by Joe Satriani. No prog pretensions here, just straight up rock and roll. It's the first album that Satriani sang on, and while he's hardly one of rock's great vocalists, he isn't a bad one either, so this is a good album to just put on and vibe to. One more guitar album on the list, Frank Zappa's aptly titled Guitar. This was the second of his collections, lifting the guitar solos from songs performed live and presenting them as tracks in their own right. He'd done it before with the Shut Up and Play Your Guitar trilogy, and again later with Transfusion. Unlike the previous albums, there's no spoken word clips on guitar, and he left them out of Transfusion as well. So we just get the band vamping while Zappa noodles. So I guess I could count Transfusion as a comfort album here as well, although I don't own a copy. Rush's debut album, the one without Neil Peart, is my kind of comfort album. They were a rock band in the vein of early Led Zeppelin on this record, only without the plagiarism. And no progressive ambitions are apparent here. I assume Peart brought those in with him when he joined the group. The songs are simple rock and roll with pretty pedestrian lyrics. Perfect comfort listen when I want something a little more rocking than Spangle or Pink Floyd. Another rock comfort album is Blue Oyster Cult's Club Ninja, which gets dragged a lot by BOC fans. But I really like this album. Every track on it, even Make Rock Not War and Beat 'Em Up. The guys play great on it. Perfect Water might be my favorite song they ever recorded. I don't know, it's a close fight between that one and Astronomy. Anyway, I love this record and I can listen to it pretty much anytime. Switching lanes here, when I want funky jams, I might play The Cinderella Theory by George Clinton. Pretty solid album, fun and easygoing for the most part. I particularly like Airbound, which is the opening and closing track. And the album has callbacks to a couple of earlier classic Clinton tracks if you care to pay attention, but most of the time I'll just put it on to vibe to it. I could pick almost any Joni Mitchell album as a comfort listen, except for her jazzy late 70s albums with Pat Metheny and Jaco Pastorius, because she really stretched her muscles as a composer in that period. And her 3 albums from the 80s, because I just don't like those 3 albums at all. But my pick is 1990's Night Ride Home, the first one I ever sat down and listened to. She's back in top form after those 3 80s releases. Sounds great. And the whole album has a pretty mellow vibe, musically at least. Lyrically, it ranges from happy to melancholy to outraged. But I don't usually pay attention to lyrics in a comfort listen. And speaking of not paying attention to lyrics brings me to my favorite singer, Masami Okui, or Makun to her fans, who of course sings in Japanese, a language that I understand very little, not enough to have a conversation in, not even enough to watch anime without the subtitles or understand the words of a song. When I listen to Makun or any other Japanese singer, what appeals to me is the instrumental composition, the arrangement, the production, the overall sound and vibe. The vocal performance is just a melodic instrument to me. I like most of Masami Okui's albums, but the one I probably like most as a comfort listen to is Her Day, her 5th album released in 1999. There are much better songs on other albums, but there are none on this one that I don't enjoy at least a little, and Lovesick might be my favorite song of hers. Ayumi Hamasaki is another singer I'm partial to. Less so than Masami because she tends more toward dance pop, while Makun is more of a rock performer, although she does plenty of typical anime show opening theme songs as well. My favorite Hamasaki album is My Story, because it rocks the most. But for a comfort listen, I would put on Love Appears. One distinct thing I've noticed while listening to Japanese pop is that almost every song follows the same structure of a 16-bar verse, usually an 8-bar figure played twice and sometimes with a variation in the last line on the repeat, followed by an 8-bar bridge that leads into a 16-bar chorus. This whole pattern's played twice. And then there's an instrumental break, usually a guitar, keyboard, or saxophone solo. There's often a sax in Makun's early work. And then the chorus is repeated, followed by a fade-out or coda. It's such a regular pattern that in its way, it's also comforting. So that's actually 13 albums, Baker's dozen of comfort albums for when I want to listen to music without listening to it. I can still actively listen to any of these records and enjoy them. I'm not calling them mindless. It's just that I don't have to actively listen to enjoy them. I'll come to that. I got another one that makes the list. I covered it last week when I talked about my favorite albums. It's the first album by Metal Church. Nothing deep or technical. It's just top quality, balls to the wall metal jams. But what are your comfort albums? What does comfort album mean to you? Do you have any records like I described? What are your go-to passive listens? Let me know in the comments. Also, smash like if you up, and please hit subscribe. It doesn't cost anything. I'll be back Saturday with a reaction, and then Wednesday after that. Until then, bright moments. Steph out.